Hi, Nir. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Let's see who we got here. We have Tala Ufer. We have Tomer Izolovich. We have Stephanie Ronan. We have many people here. Okay. Welcome, everyone. We're happy to have you here with us on this webinar. It's really great having you here to learn with us about how to be indestructible. Just so we will know that you are here with us, so you can type whatever you want on the chat, as someone just did. On the chat on the right side. Hi, Shani. Hi, Uriah, Yael, Alan, Hada. Wow, this is the way to go, guys. Amazing, amazing. You are definitely focused on your goal to learn from Nir. This is wonderful. Okay, we'll wait for 1 more minute. So those who are running to their computer or mobile could join us and not miss anything. So just 1 second. It's great to have you here, Rachel. Hey all, Yuval. Hey you. This is great. Hey Joe. Wonderful. Okay. So I think we're ready. What do you think, Nir?
Let's do it. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly. So hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Moria Cassis. I'm the founder and general manager of Product League. Product League is a 4-month-long mentoring program for product managers by product managers. Today's session is a webinar brought to you, leaguers, to support you on your journey to learn how to control your attention and choose your life as product professionals. Our speaker for today is Nir Eyal. Nir is the best-selling author of the 2 successful books, Hooked and Indistractable. He is taught at the Stanford Graduate School of Business and Hasso-Plattner Institute of Design. His writing on technology, psychology, and business appears in the HBR, The Atlantic, TechCrunch, and Psychology Today. We will discuss best practices for achieving the competitive advantage of being focused in both work and life. We will reveal the hidden psychology that is driving us to distraction. And then, together with Nir, we will learn how to get the best from technology without letting it get the best of us, and how to design our own behavior so we'll become indistractables. We would love to hear from you. So listen, engage, and ask questions. A recorded version of this webinar will be available soon and will be shared on our website and social media platforms. Nir, it's great having you here today with us at Product League. How are you?
Great. Thank you so much. It's great to be here, and it's great to see so many people attending. I'm thrilled that everyone is here. And so, yeah, should we just dive in?
Exactly. Go ahead. And we're all focused on you right now. So the stage is yours.
All right. Thanks so much. So welcome, everyone. Today we want to talk about how to become indistractable. We've all seen how these devices that we all use can have such a profound impact on our day-to-day lives. But unfortunately, many of us have seen that these devices can often lead to distraction, or at least it seems that that's the case. If you think about the last time that you were at a dinner with friends and somehow people around the table are on their phones as opposed to being fully present, or maybe you sat down at your desk to work on a big project and yet found yourself emailing or on Slack or doing something other than what you intended to do with your time. What's going on here? Why do we seem so distracted today? And is it really our technologies doing it to us, or is there something deeper going on? So a few years ago, I wrote a book called Hooked, which was all about how to build habit-forming products. And I wrote that book in order to unlock many of the secrets that companies like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and WhatsApp use to keep people hooked to their products and services. Now, I didn't write that book for those companies. They've known these techniques for years. I wrote the book for you. I wrote it for product people, they would just use the product. And that's exactly what's happened over the past 5 years since Hooked was published. We see companies all over the world in every conceivable industry using the Hooked model to make the kind of products and services that truly benefit users' lives by creating healthy habits. people hooking others through healthy products, for example, like Kahoot, whose mission is to get kids hooked onto in-classroom learning. Companies like Fitbod that get people hooked to exercising in the gym. Companies like Bite Foods that get people hooked to healthier eating options. So certainly we can use these techniques to help people form healthy habits in their lives. But of course, just as we have good habits, we can also have bad habits. And that's what my next book, Indistractable, is all about. You see, a few years ago when I was with my daughter one afternoon, I found that I became distracted in a way that I didn't like. I remember I was sitting with my daughter and we had this beautiful afternoon planned, and we were going to play all these games from a book of different activities that daddies and daughters could do together. One of the activities was to make paper airplanes and see who could throw it farther. Another was to make little origami boats. And one of the activities, superpower. What superpower would you like? And I remember my daughter asking this question. I remember it verbatim, and yet I can't tell you what my daughter said. Because in that moment when she was answering, I was busy on my phone, and I told her to just wait a quick second because I had become distracted by my device. And so my daughter got the message that whatever was on my phone was more important than she was. And by the time I looked up from my device, she'd left the room and she went to play with some toy outside. And so that's when I decided that I had to do something about this problem, that I had to understand why I was getting so distracted. Because let me be totally honest with you, this wasn't the only time that I became distracted by my device. In fact, when I was with friends, I was one of those people looking at my device instead of being fully present. Or when I was at work, I would sit down to do something and yet somehow find myself doing something else, checking email or scrolling something on Facebook or checking Google. This was having an impact in many aspects of my life. And so that's when I decided that I'd had enough, that I wanted to understand how to become indistractable. That's the superpower I'd want. And in fact, I think that becoming indistractable is the skill of the century. That when we think about what it takes to succeed in all sorts of professions, including product management, we need the power to focus in order to be creative. In order to solve problems, we have to be able to control our attention and choose our life. And so what I want to share with you is some techniques that I've discovered, some strategies as well as techniques, I should say, that I discovered over the past 5 years of researching how to become indistractable. The first thing we should know is that this is not a new problem. That in fact, 2,500 years ago, the philosopher Plato talked about this problem. He called it akrasia, the tendency that we all have to do things against our better interest. And so if we are going to tackle this problem of akrasia, we have to understand the deeper psychology behind why we become distracted. So a good place to start is to understand, what does this word even mean? What is distraction all about? And a good way to understand distraction is to understand the opposite of distraction. So if you ask most people, what's the opposite of distraction? They would tell you it's focus. But distraction, that both words come from the same Latin root, trahare, which means to pull, and they both end in the same 6 letters, A-C-T-I-O-N, and that spells action. So traction is any action that pulls you towards what you want, okay? Things that you do with intent. The opposite of traction is distraction, anything that pulls you away from what you plan to do, things that you do not do with intent. So this is really important for 2 reasons. Number one, anything can be a distraction. And this happens to us every day in the office, right? We sit down at our desk, we say we're going to work on that big project, we're not going to procrastinate anymore, we're going to do the right after we scroll that Slack channel. And somehow we keep getting distracted. We don't do the thing we say we're going to do, but it feels like work, right? I'm just checking email because that's kind of a worky thing that I need to do anyway, right? Well, if it's not what you plan to do with your time, it is just as much of a distraction. Anything that you didn't plan to do is a distraction. So that's point number one. Point number two is that just as anything can be a distraction, anything can be traction. That if you plan ahead, if you plan time to do what you like to do, whether it's going on Facebook or scrolling Instagram or watching something on TV, whatever it might be, that can be traction as long as it's done on your schedule and it's according to your values. There's nothing wrong with it. So I hate this stupid moral hierarchy of, oh, you playing Candy Crush or Angry Birds, that's somehow, morally inferior to me watching football on TV. What's the difference? There is no difference. As long as you do it with intent, there's nothing wrong with it. Enjoy it. So we got traction, we got distraction. Either external triggers or internal triggers. External triggers are the pings, the dings, the rings, all of these things in our environment that can move us towards traction or distraction. Now, that's what people tend to blame distraction on, right? They say, oh, I was working on a project and then my cell phone rang and I got distracted. That's the external trigger. But what you did in response to that external trigger is either traction or distraction, okay? Now, as much as we blame those external triggers, it turns out a much more frequent cause of the internal triggers. Internal triggers are these uncomfortable emotional states that we seek to escape. Now, all human behavior is about one thing, and that one thing is about escaping discomfort. Now, many people will tell you something different. Many people will say that motivation is about carrots and sticks, right? It's about the pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain. But if you actually look at the neuroscience, what we know is happening really boils down to just one thing, and that is the desire to escape discomfort. That in fact, in the brain, there are two neural circuits. One is called the liking system, and one is called the wanting system. The job of the liking system is to encode pleasurable memories in order for the wanting system to get us to go pursue those pleasurable memories. It gets us to do things because they felt good. And how does the brain get us to do that? By spurring us with discomfort, with some kind of pain that makes us act. So when we think about it physiologically in our bodies, if we're cold, we put on a coat. If we're hot, we take it off. If we're hungry, we feel hunger pangs, so we eat. And when we eat too much, that doesn't feel good, so we stop eating. And so in our bodies, we see this happening all the time. This is called a homeostatic response. But the same is true in our minds. That when we think about what spurs us to distraction, it's the same principle. When we're feeling lonely, where do we go? We check Facebook. When we're feeling uncertain, what do? We Google. When we're feeling bored, what do? We check the news. We look at stock prices, sports scores, Reddit, Pinterest. All of these things cater to an uncomfortable emotional sensation. So this means that fundamentally, if all human behavior is spurred by a desire to escape discomfort, that means that time management is pain management. That if we don't learn how to manage discomfort, and so there's some things that we can do about this. Here's how we master internal triggers. There's a lot more in the book that I don't have time to cover, but I just want to give you a few techniques. So fundamentally, there's only two paths we can take. We can either fix the source of the discomfort, whatever's causing our pain, whether that's a toxic work environment, whether that's a difficult home life, whatever it might be that's causing us this discomfort that we seek to escape from, or for the things that we can't change, for the uncomfortable sensations that we can't escape, our only other choice is to learn tactics to cope with that discomfort in a healthier manner. So let me give you just a few techniques that I use almost every single day to cope with that discomfort in a healthier manner. The first thing that you can do when you get distracted is to identify the sensation. Psychologists tell us that by simply noting what it is that you're feeling, whether it's boredom, stress, anxiety, fatigue, loneliness, uncertainty, whatever it might be, if you can simply name that sensation and write it down, psychologists tell us this is a critical step to gaining greater agency over that sensation as opposed to letting it control you. So that's step one. Step two is to explore that sensation with curiosity rather than contempt. You see, blamers or shamers. Blamers are people who say, oh, you see, it's my cell phone that did it to me. It's Facebook, it's Slack, it's this technology that's doing it to me. Those are the blamers. The shamers say, this is what I used to do. I used to tell myself, oh, you see, I'm lazy. I have a short attention span. Something else. I should probably get another job. And I would blame myself. I would shame myself, I should say. And that's not healthy either. Why? Because both of these reactions lead to a vicious cycle. The worse we feel about ourselves, the more likely we are to look for escape with, guess what? More distraction. So the idea here is that we have to break this cycle of this vicious cycle of these uncomfortable sensations. And the way we do that is with curiosity. So one technique to do this is by using what's called the 10-minute rule. The 10-minute rule works like this. Whenever you're about to get distracted, whether it's because you want to eat a piece of chocolate cake that you know you shouldn't have, or because you want to check email when you know you wanted to work on that big project, what I do is to just set a timer for 10 minutes. And my job for those 10 minutes is to just surf the urge. This comes from acceptance and commitment therapy. And the idea here is to surf the emotion like a surfer on a wave. You know, waves are like emotions. They crest and then they subside. And the idea here is that if you can feel that sensation for just a few minutes, this will allow you to either get back to the task at hand once the sensation crests and goes away, or if you need to, just write it out and then you can give in to whatever temptation at the end of the 10 minutes. So by giving yourself that choice of either experiencing the sensation, just feeling what it is you're experiencing, or getting back to the task at hand, 9 times out of 10, you will find that you will get right back to what you originally wanted to do. So this is a much healthier technique than strict abstinence, right? You know, we know that strict abstinence backfires, that when you tell yourself, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, that in fact creates more of that internal trigger that when we release, in fact, feels good. And so we are creating a pattern into it. And so this technique has been very effective in terms of smoking cessation, in terms of helping people make sure that they do what they really want to do by not becoming distracted with some unintended behavior. So that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more that we can do to master internal triggers. But for the sake of time, I want to take you through the next big strategy, which is to make time for traction. So it turns out that 2/3 of people don't keep a calendar. And of course, this is ridiculous because if you think about it, how can we complain about getting distracted if we don't? The only way to know what is traction, or to know what is distraction, I should say, is to know what is traction for your day, which means you've got to plan how you want to spend your time. And so a critical step to becoming indistractable is to make a simple template for your day. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't spend your time having fun. It doesn't mean you have to spend your time only working. No, you can plan time to live out your values, whatever your values might be. So I talk about in the book these 3 life domains: taking care of yourself, taking care of your relationships, and then your workplace. So if you don't take care of yourself first, if you don't live up to your values for yourself, you can't take care of others. How much time do I need in my schedule to live out my values? And so if one of your values is to take care of your body, right? About take care of your health. Well, do you have time in your day for proper rest, for proper nutrition? Do you have time to exercise? Is it on your calendar? Then about relationships. If you care about your friends and that's important to you, that's one of your values, do you have time in your calendar to be with your friends on a regular basis? And then in your work, what are the most important functions of your job? Are you spending your time the way you think you should spend your time to do your best work? Or are you constantly reacting to things with no time for reflection? When I talk to product managers, I constantly hear how they don't have time to think. That in fact, thinking has been shown to be a huge competitive advantage. That if we want to do our best work, we have to make time in our day to just think without interruption. And so a critical step to becoming indistractable is. Now, this also means that part of becoming indistractable is to synchronize your calendar with the various stakeholders in your life. So what I recommend doing, if you have a life partner, a husband, a wife, to sit down with them and show them this time box calendar. And I can give you a link here in a minute for in the chat for a free tool I built that can help you make your template calendar. And what I want you to do is to once a week, I do this with my wife. It really saved my marriage, if I'm totally honest. I've been married for 18 years and it saved my marriage because my wife and I would constantly fight about how I wasn't doing my fair share of household responsibilities. This will change your domestic life. Believe me, if you have someone at home who's not pulling their weight, or maybe you're not pulling your weight and doing your fair share, this will change your life. Sit down with that person, look over that calendar. It takes us 15 minutes a week. And it will absolutely change your life. The same goes in the workplace. Your boss, I bet you, is desperate to see what you're up to. But what I found in my research, that most bosses don't want to micromanage people. They don't want to ask them how they're spending their time because they're afraid they're going to be seen as being a micromanager. Do your boss a favor, do yourself. Here's how I'm spending my time this week. Okay, there are these things that I didn't get to. You see this list of things that aren't on the calendar? I didn't find time for those in the week ahead. Help me reprioritize. Tell me what should be taken off my calendar for next week so that I can put on some of these other priorities. This will take you 15 minutes. You can do it once a week, and it will absolutely change your work life by synchronizing your schedule with the various stakeholders in your life. Okay, so that's step 2. That's about making time for traction. Step 3, and of course I show you a lot more in the book on how to do that. Step 3 is about hacking back external triggers. So remember, external triggers are these pings, these dings, these rings, all of these things in the outside environment that can lead us towards distraction. So of course we want to hack back our phones. I don't want to hear that you think that devices are distracting if you haven't even taken 10 minutes to change your notification settings. Turns out that 2/3 of people with a smartphone never change their notification settings. That's ridiculous. Of course we have to change our notification settings. So we can change our notification settings on our phone, on our computer. That's kindergarten. That's baby stuff. Of course do that. But I would contend that some of the most pernicious external triggers aren't just the ones on our technology, but in fact they're the ones that come from other people. I'm guessing that many of you work in open floor plan offices. And you know that working in an open floor plan office can be incredibly distracting. Somebody comes by your desk and says, hey, I want to tell you some gossip that I just heard. Or can I just talk to you for a quick second? It's never just a quick second. You know how that is. And so in order to manage distraction, one of the things that we can do is to hack back these distractions in the workplace by using what I call a screen sign. In every copy of the book, there is a piece of cardstock that you rip out of the book, you fold it into thirds, and you put it on your computer monitor. And this tells your colleagues, hey, I'm indistractable right now. Please come back later. This will help you get that focused work time in your day. Now, I know what you're saying. Somebody's saying, yeah, but that's why I put on headphones, right? When I put on headphones, people know I'm working on something. Here's the problem. They think you're watching YouTube. So instead of people thinking that you're lazy and that you're slacking off, put a sign on your computer monitor that says, hey, look, I need some certain times of your day when you need focused work. Send that message to your colleagues that you need to be left alone to think, and you will do much better work during that focused work time. Excuse me. Now, there are other things we can do in terms of hacking back email, hacking back meetings, lots of things that we can hack back, hacking back group chat, lots of potential sources of distractions. That there's a lot more to discuss there. Happy to answer more questions about that later on. But for the sake of time, let's move on to the fourth step, which is all about preventing distraction with pacts. Now, pacts are what's called a pre-commitment device. A pre-commitment device is when we plan ahead, when we decide ahead of time what we are going to do when we become potentially distracted. And there are three types of pacts that we can make: an effort pact, a price pact, and an identity pact. An effort pact is when we put some bit of work between us and something we don't want to do. So in my household, I found that night after night, my wife and I were getting to bed later and later. And this wasn't good for our love life. It wasn't good for our relationship. It wasn't good for the fact that we weren't getting as much sleep as we needed. So what did I do? I went to the hardware store and I bought us this $5 internet. You can set a little dial for whatever is plugged into it will turn off at a certain time of day or night. So every night in my household, the internet router shuts off at 10 p.m. So that's a pre-commitment I made in advance to make sure I don't do something I don't want to do. Now, could I turn it back on? Could I find a way to get on the internet? Of course I could. But it puts a little bit of friction between me and something I don't want to do. So now I have a bit of effort that causes me to ask myself, hey, do I really need to do this? Or is this a distraction? So that's one example of an effort pact. We can also use a price pact. A price pact is when there's some kind of cost to doing something you don't want to do. And then the last type of pre-commitment we can use is called an identity pact. An identity pact is when we call ourselves something. We have a moniker, a noun that we use to describe ourselves that helps keep us on. That people who call themselves a certain moniker, a certain name, are much more likely to achieve their long-term goals. Good example of this, look, if somebody is a religious Orthodox Jew, they don't say to themselves, I wonder if I should have some shrimp or some bacon today. No, they're Orthodox. They don't eat those things because a religious Orthodox Jew doesn't do that stuff. So they don't have to have a lot of self-control and willpower to prevent them from doing that. A vegetarian or a vegan doesn't wake up every day and say, I wonder if I'll have a hamburger today. No, they are a vegetarian. It helps them stay in line with what they plan to do. And so this is what becoming indistractable is all about. That's why the book is called Indistractable. It's back to that superpower I told you about when I was with my daughter. When you call yourself indistractable, and this is something we're never done doing, right? We're on a process. We're becoming indistractable. So it doesn't mean you have to do everything in the book. It means start doing something on this path to becoming indistractable. And one of the best things that you can do is to start calling yourself indistractable, just like people call themselves vegetarian or Hasidic or whatever it might be. When you call yourself a moniker, it helps you stay in line with that identity. So when people ask, hey, how come you're not returning text messages every 30 seconds? Or what's that weird screen sign on your computer monitor that says you're indistractable? What is that about? You can say, oh, I'm indistractable. I live with personal integrity. I'm the kind of person who does what they say they're going to do in accordance with my values. And so many of these behaviors seem a little strange. They seem a little unorthodox. Well, here's the thing. This is what it takes to change society. I remember that when someone came to our home, and I remember this was all over the place. So, in many countries that I would visit, I went to Israel every summer, and I remember this was very much in effect in Israel as well as in America. I remember that people would just smoke in your living room. It was just part of what people did. But of course, today, if someone just came to your house and lit up a cigarette, that would be ridiculous, right? That would be very rude. Without asking, that would be very strange. Well, how did that happen? How did that change? You say, well, laws made smoking more difficult. Well, there's no law that says you can't smoke in someone's living room. What changed was our norms, our manners, how we treat this stuff. And that's exactly what's going on today with technology. I remember when my mom asked people to please go outside to smoke, she lost friends over that. Smokers said, what are you talking about? I'm not going to go outside to smoke. That was strange. That was weird. Well, that's what's happening today with technology. That these distractions, this is something we can do something about. We can become indistractable and share this new way of being with others. And I think over the next few years, we're going to see a lot more people using these techniques to live the kind of life that they want, unencumbered by these distractions. I believe we can technologies without letting them get the best of us. Thank you very much. And with that, I would love to take some questions. And let me put up this link so that you can see that tool.
Hi, it's Moria here again. I wonder who will ask the first question. So, okay, we already have the first brave one. Oren, how would you suggest improving learning skills in terms of being indistractable? Nir, this goes back to you.
How to improve your learning skills? Was that the question?
Yeah. How would you suggest improving learning skills in terms of being indistractable?
Yeah, so the problem with online learning today is that we've forgotten what makes people stay focused on a particular lesson. I work with a lot of companies in terms of how to build habit-forming products. A lot of online learning companies have a big problem because people aren't finishing their courses. And a big reason why people aren't finishing talk all day long is really, really boring. And what they don't realize is that when you're in a classroom, you have that social pressure of the teacher can see you. And if you leave, that tells you something, right? That's very rude to do. You have other students around you. And so that physical location, now that it's now online, makes it so that people can leave. Not only that, if you're watching someone teach like I am right now, you can have email. Part of what we have to figure out how to help students do is to engage them in a way that makes a lesson more engaging. So that's what Hook, this first book here, is all about, how to build habit-forming products that are more engaging. So a company I invested in that uses the Hook model is called Kahoot, and Kahoot uses the Hook model to get kids hooked in classroom learning. Another thing we have to do is to teach people how to become indistractable so that they can stay focused on the lesson at hand. That we know it's very difficult to learn anything when your brain is in 100 different places and you're trying to do 100 different things, almost impossible to learn in that type of environment. We have to stay focused on one thing at a time.
This next one. The next one is by Yael. Super interesting talk. Thank you. Can you talk about hacking out meetings?
I'm sorry, one more time. Can you say that a little louder?
Can you talk about hacking out meetings?
Oh, hacking back meetings. Okay, yes. Meetings are a huge waste of time in most companies on most occasions. It's more difficult to hold. Why? Because remember how I told you earlier how all human behavior is spurred by a desire to escape discomfort? Well, what happens at many companies, and I'm sure many of you have seen this, let me know in the comments if you've seen this. How many of you been to a meeting where someone calls the meeting just to hear themselves talk? Or because they're too lazy to think of the solution themselves? And so what happens, right, so many times, raise hands, right? We see this all the time. What happens if you don't feel in control of your environment? What happens if you are lazy and don't want to call that meeting? Your friends over, you say, okay, everybody, I want a meeting because I need to talk this out. So what we want to do is to make calling a meeting more effortful, more difficult. How do we do that? I took a lesson. They need two things. Number one, they need an agenda. Okay. What are we going to do in this meeting? Why are we calling this meeting? So we have to have a pre-distributed agenda. No agenda, no meeting. Number two, you want to make sure that in order to call a meeting, a briefing doc is shared. A briefing doc is simply when the person who calls the meeting says, here's my homework. Here's what I did in order to call this meeting. Here's how I thought this through. For one thing, the purpose of a meeting is for one purpose, and that is to gain consensus, okay? Meetings should not be for brainstorming. It turns out that studies find that brainstorming is not effective in big groups. Brainstorming is most effective when people do it by themselves or maximum 2 people. Why? Because here's what happens when we have a brainstorming meeting with a bunch of people. The loud people dominate. Typically, unfortunately, that person is usually male and usually the boss. So we get more groupthink because the boss is dominating the discussion. And the people who maybe are a little bit quieter or more junior don't share their ideas in the moment. They kind of, they kind of hide away because other people are so loud and take up so much space. So don't do brainstorming. People share what they came up with beforehand. A meeting's purpose should be to gain consensus. So that means if we call a meeting, you, as the person who calls the meeting, need to distribute on a piece of paper or through an email that you did your homework. Here's what I came up with, and here is the intended course of action. And then we're going to get together and make sure that we gain consensus over this action plan. And if people say, hey, you know what? You didn't that's the purpose of the meeting. Okay? So call the meeting for the right reason. Make sure that you have distributed an agenda and a briefing document. And then the last thing, and this is going to be controversial, 1 computer per email. I'm sorry, 1 computer per meeting. Meaning, if we're going to have a meeting in the physical world, we need to be there both in body and mind. How many of us go to meetings where half the people in the room are on their devices in the middle of the goddamn meeting? Why the hell are we having a meeting if people's brains are somewhere else? We waste so much time having these meetings where people aren't there. And then here's what happens. Somebody raises a question, and then somebody's caught off guard because they haven't been listening. They've been checking email on their phone, and they say, wait, what's going on? And now we have to waste all this time getting the boss up to speed because they've been putzing around on their phone. So the solution is that every meeting room needs to have a charging station. Remember ABC, always be charging. So every conference room should have a charging station. And when people come into the meeting, they put their phones or their laptops on the charging station. Then we have 1 computer in the room that projects on a screen what we're talking about, presents relevant information, slides, and uses the agenda to get people's inputs and feedback about the consensus that we're trying to build. But we only need one computer per meeting. So everybody can leave those devices, those distractions outside. So those are my 3 big tips. Laptop per meeting. How's that?
Now we have 2 completing questions here by Karina and Etty. So Karina is asking, what is a good way of expanding these sort of commitments to our friends? And Etty is asking, fantastic talk, thank you. How do you hack Slack emails when you're expected to be available immediately and around the clock, and consider slow or less available when using those techniques? So both are asking with our friends, with our colleagues, how can we actually focus on these amazing tips and tricks that you share with us and not be considered as unpolite or less available?
Yeah. Okay. So let's deal with, let's do the friends part first. So there's a section in the friends, our loved ones, they're around the table using their devices. Maybe we use the device as well. That doesn't feel good. But let's say that you're convinced about the importance of becoming indistractable. Congratulations, you sat through my talk. You're now indistractable, and you're going to adopt these techniques. But what happens if you go out to dinner and somebody is on their device? What do? We don't want to tell somebody, hey, get off your phone, right? That doesn't feel good. That's rude. You're going to lose that friend. And frankly, you don't know. There might be an emergency on the other side of that screen. Maybe somebody's kid is sick. Maybe there's some kind of crisis at work that they need to deal with. So we don't want to assume that we know what's going on in their life. We may not know. So there's a simple question that we can ask to give people a hint of what we're implying, while also making sure that when we see someone at the table using their device, we ask them sincerely, okay, this isn't passive aggressive. We ask them sincerely, hey, I see you're on your phone. Is everything okay? And by simply asking this question, it prompts them to say, oh, you know what? No problem. Or 9 times out of 10, they get the hint. Because here's the thing, just like with smoking, right? We've been here before. People realize, they say, oh my gosh, I can't smoke here, my bad, and they put it away, okay? That's what's happening today with devices. People are realizing if you use your friend when we go, or use your phone when we go out to lunch, you're being a jerk. That's rude. That's like picking your nose at the dinner table. It's rude. And people are learning this message. And the way we spread this message is by doing things like making it inappropriate, showing people that it's culturally, not a nice thing to do these things, just like smoking in someone's living room. And so we need people who say, okay, I'm going to be a little bit different. I'm going to, be a little bit outside the norm. Is it any different from someone who wears unusual religious outfits? Is that so different? Or someone who eats vegetarian? Is it so different to be the kind of person who says, hey, I'm indistractable. You know what? We don't have phones at the dinner table in my household, or whatever it might be. So that's one technique in our own homes. Now, let's talk about the workplace, the second question. So I just gave you a bunch of techniques around what you can do yourself. But I'm not so naive to believe that the workplace doesn't affect our behavior. Of course, you can become indistractable, but if your boss decides to call you at 7 p.m. on a Friday night, is it the telephone that your boss used to call you that's at fault? Or is it the fact that your boss is part of this crappy workplace culture that makes it okay to call somebody after hours? And so this is why we have to acknowledge that distraction in the workplace is a symptom of cultural dysfunction. That at the end of the day, we can become indistractable. And that's the first step. I would focus on the things that you yourself can do. So if you say, how do I change my workplace? Become indistractable yourself. Show people how much better your work output is, how much happier your life is, given the fact that you do what you're going to do every day. Sit down with your boss and make that schedule. Show them your time box schedule and say, hey, can we have this quick schedule sync every week? That's a great thing you can do. This always on type culture. And that happens to a lot of people. So first of all, I have no problem with people working a lot of hours, okay? If you want to start a startup, if you want to work on Wall Street, look, you have to understand that's part of the job. And if you understand that to start a tech company or to work on Wall Street, you're going to have to work 60, 70, 80 hours a week, and you're okay with that, I got no problem with that, right? I don't like these French laws that say you can only work 35 hours a week. All that does is make people cheat, okay? So I don't like that. If you are okay with that, do it. I'm not going to tell you otherwise. However, what I don't think is right is when a company says, yep, 40 hours a week. That's what we do here. We all work 40 hours a week. And then you join the company and it turns out that those 40 hours are at work. But then you're expected to work another 30, 40 hours on nights and weekends. So that's not fair. That's a bait and switch. That's a lie. And so that's not ethical. And it turns out that technology is not the core part of the problem. The real the company culture where people can't talk about the problem. Let me say that again. The real problem is that people can't talk about the problem. That studies find that when companies give employees what's called psychological safety. Psychological safety is when you can raise your hand and say, hey, I have a problem here. Can we talk about this without the fear of getting fired? Most companies don't give employees that psychological safety. And in fact, we know that there is a confluence of two conditions that have been shown to literally drive people crazy at work. They lead to anxiety and depression disorder. The two conditions are a state of high expectations coupled with low control. Okay, if you have high expectations with high control, you're fine. That's a good environment. But if you have high expectations with low control, meaning you're expected to do a lot, but you can't actually control the outcomes, leads to anxiety and depression disorder. And of course, what do people do when they feel depressed, when they feel anxious, when they lack control in the agency? They call more meetings. They send more stupid emails that don't need to be sent. They distract themselves as well as everybody else because they're desperate for control. They're desperate for the agency they lack. And so the problem goes much deeper than just our technology. Technology perpetuates this problem, but the root cause, the disease, is a crappy company culture. And so I profile in the book two companies. One of them is Slack. Ironically enough, this company that makes this tool that many people complain about. And the other company is the Boston Consulting Group. And I talk about how these two companies, one of them has always had a great culture. The other actually changed their company culture to become the type of workplace that doesn't suffer from distraction. And I talk about how anyone can change their company culture by first changing themselves, then changing their team, and then hopefully changing the broader company culture. But that process can take some time.
Is that, guys, it starts with you. So change your day, show everyone it's possible, right? You deliver, you keep on making things, and you're just happier with your work and your delivery because you're less stressful. Let's admit it, because you're more focused on what you do, and then everyone will join. Amazing. So next question is by, I hope I pronounce it the right way, Ananjanye. You mentioned how being indistractable is different from being able to concentrate or focus for longer periods of time. How could I focus for a longer period of time to be more efficient in the period that I'm indistractable?
Yeah, so this is what the 4 steps are all about. So step 1 is to discover why you are looking to escape. What is it about the work you're doing or the time you're trying to do whatever it is you're trying to do? That's the first step. And learn tactics to cope with that discomfort in a healthier manner. The second step is to make time for traction. So many people, they believe in this myth of the to-do list. We're all told in the self-help community to be productive, keep a to-do list. But that's a myth, because the to-do list, we all know how to-do lists work. Let's be honest with ourselves here. How many of us, we have a to-do list, and then half of the things on our to-do list just gets recycled from one day to the next day, to the next day, to the next day. Does that happen to anyone? That used to happen to me all the time. And the problem here is that simply planning your to-dos is silly, that we also have to plan for the time to do those tasks. Making the to-do list is only step 1. And here's the problem with what most people do. I used to do this all the time. I had 100 things on my to-do list, and I had a super productive day. I got 3 things done. And at the end of the day, I look at my to-do list and I still have 97 things to do. And that feels horrible. It feels so shitty. To-do list, and this is critical, what's in my calendar. You understand? So if something is on your to-do list, it also has to be on your calendar. Your to-do list is output. Your calendar is input. As a knowledge worker, your input is time. So don't put on your to-do list, finish this, finish this, finish this. you can't control how long it takes you to necessarily finish something. What you need to do is to put on your calendar, work on this for X number of minutes, work on this for 1 hour, 2 hours, whatever it might be. That's what you have to put in your calendar. Plan the input and the output will follow. So that's step number 2, make time for traction. Put those things on your calendar. Number 3, hack back the external triggers. Make sure that when you sit down to do that thing that you need to concentrate on, that you need to focus, you don't have all these pings, dings, and rings, that your colleagues aren't coming by your desk, that you don't have all of these potential external triggers that lead you towards distraction. And then finally, make sure that you have these pre-commitments that you use to prevent you from getting distracted. So this is where you can use an effort pact, a price pact, an identity pact to make sure that when the time comes, you don't become distracted. One of the things I use is I use technology to help me prevent getting distracted by technology. So let me show you real quick. On my home screen, I'll show you, I use this app called Forest. And here's how Forest works. You see how it says 45 minutes on this app? If I pick up the phone and do anything with it, that little virtual tree dies. And so I don't want that to happen, right? So it's a little pre-commitment. It's a tool that helps me stay on track. That would be an example of an effort pact. So we can use technology to help prevent us from getting distracted by technology. But that's step 4, and the app is called Forest.
What you're saying is one of the tips that you mentioned is moving from thinking about our schedule in terms of the delivery, let's finish this task, to for how long are we going to be focused on this subject or this matter or this task that we are having. Is this the answer to Dinah's question? How do you improve jumping between subtasks while trying to focus on the main task? This often leads to exploring other related topics that generate noise and confusion. So is this also the way to deal with this kind of, let's say, annoying situations?
Right, so it's all 4. Okay, so if you just use one of the techniques, like if you just use the Forest app, it's not going to work. Because if you haven't dealt with the internal triggers of why you are seeking to escape and mentally know how to use these tools to disarm those internal triggers and master them, if you haven't planned your day, if you haven't hacked back the external triggers, then finally the fourth technique of preventing distraction with pacts, it's really about using these 4 techniques in concert. If you just use one or you use them in the wrong order, then it's not going to work.
Then from a self is actually something you and I discussed, I think 3 years ago when you visited here. So question, isn't creating products that get people hooked is sort of manipulating of our will and their will? Isn't it a way of making people habitually distracted? What is your ethical standpoint on this?
Yeah, so hooked is about getting people hooked to healthy habits, right? So if you want to build a habit in your life, then you would use hooked. If you want to build a product to get people hooked to a healthy behavior, that's wonderful. That's great. There's nothing wrong with getting people hooked to exercising in the gym or hooked to a product that they enjoy using. Look, even hooked to Facebook and Instagram. There's nothing wrong with these products, right? There's nothing unethical about them. It's about using them in a way that benefits us. And I would argue these technologies are great. I mean, there's so many people that I would not be in. So we have to stop this bullshit that this technology is addictive and it's hijacking. That is rubbish. It is not true. Anybody who's built product knows it's really, really hard to get people to use your product. That for the vast majority of people, if a product isn't benefiting them, if they don't like it, guess what? They stop using it. And so the vast majority of businesses out there, their problem is not that people are overusing a product. Their problem is that not enough people are using their product. Nobody's getting addicted to enterprise software. Nobody's getting addicted to small business products. I mean, these companies need to use these psychological hacks. Why don't they use the same technique that Facebook and Twitter and Instagram all use? How shitty is most software out there? So I think the problem is not that people use this stuff too much is that most companies don't use it enough. But of course, where we have good habits, sometimes we have bad habits. And so that's where we should use these particular techniques for us. Technology, but also get rid of the bad technologies that don't, or bad distractions that don't serve us, the bad habits, I should say.
Products that people love, and then everything will be perfect from there, because it's true, it's not about technology, it's about the way we are choosing to use our time. So we have time for one more question, and I am going to wait here for some of you to write, and we will choose the last one. Let's see who will be quick enough to put some questions in. We have one question from Ilan. We have one question from Etty. Any other buyers? Okay, so the last one, the winner for the last question is Etty. And Etty's question is, what is your to-do, what is your go-to to-do list, calendar, and email apps, or some other tools that you would recommend? So she's asking about tools. Let's see how is your work day looks like.
Yeah, let me just before I do that, I want to just add this workbook here. Sorry, this link. So I have an 80-page workbook for people. It's totally complimentary that you can get at this link that I just put up there, which helps you become indistractable. It's this guided workbook. We couldn't fit it into the book. It's really helpful. It's if you want it, the link is right there. And there's also a list of all sorts of tools as well that I described. There's over 80 different tools that I use, like Forest, like these different tools and technologies that can help you become indistractable. I think a big part of the solution is better technology, right? That what humans have always done in the face of adversity, in the face of a problem, is that we adapt our behaviors and we adopt new technology to fix the last generation of technology. And so I'll give you that guide as well at that link. You can get this as well. That helps you. Actually, sorry, it's at a different link. Let me put that in. There, where you can get all those tools as well. But I use Gmail. I started using Superhuman lately, but it doesn't. I don't know if it's worth switching. I think you can do everything I describe in terms of reducing your email load and using these techniques in Gmail is just fine. Outlook is just fine. I use Google Calendar. Remember, it's not about the tips and tricks. It's about the strategy. It's understanding the psychology of why we get distracted. That's actually more important than the specific, which calendar, which this, with that. I did build that scheduling tool that I shared the link to earlier because I wanted to give people a very simple way to make a template for what their week should look like. So that for the first time, people can very quickly enter in what their ideal week looks like so that they can look at it and say, this is traction. Anything that's not that is distraction. So that's the one technology I'd recommend because, I think that using Google Calendar for some people is too much work. It's not as flexible as I think it should be. So that's why I built, thanks Asaf. Asaf just posted it again there, this schedule maker tool that makes it really, really easy. It's totally free. You don't even need to sign up for anything. It's just a very simple way for you to make this calendar, and then it's saved in your cache on your browser so that you can come back to it and make small adjustments in the future.
Okay, so first of all, thank you so much. It was amazing.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Really, thank you for having me. But one more question before you're leaving us. As you know, our program is for product managers. So everything we discussed until now is relevant for everyone who is dealing with the modern work-life balance, no balance, however we'll call it, and the drive to deliver more and to focus on what we want to achieve. If you, as Nir, as yourself, could have one message to product managers out there, what will it be? Because you have such an interesting position in our industry. You're a lecturer, you're an author, you're an angel investor. You see so many products, you're involved in so many angles of the industry. So if you could share one message with the product managers out there internationally, what will it be?
Yeah, so to summarize Indistractable with one mantra, it's this: that the antidote to impulsiveness is forethought. That human beings have this amazing gift that we can see the future better than any other animal on the face of the earth. We can predict what's going to happen with higher fidelity than any other creature. And so we can use antidote to impulsiveness is forethought. That when we think about, if the chocolate cake is on the fork already, you're going to eat it. If the cigarette is lit, you're going to smoke it. If your phone is on your nightstand and you're as far from your phone as you are from your husband or wife, well, then you're going to. Solution is to plan ahead. That there is no algorithm, there is no recipe, there is no technology that is so powerful that we can't resist if we plan ahead. So the antidote to impulsiveness is forethought.
Wonderful, guys, all product managers and product leaders out there. Nir, I think you're spot on. You're just on the right way of thinking about it. Our present, our future is in our hands. We need to focus on the things that we care about. We need to focus on the things that we want to deliver. And we are the change, right? We are those to say to the world, we do not need to be available all the time, because guess what? We care about our life. We care about the people we care about. We care about our friends. We care about our work, and we care about ourselves. So
we are indistractable.
Exactly. Thank you so much for your time, Nir. It has been a pleasure. Looking forward to our next session. We'll soon
My pleasure
again. Wonderful. Thank you for all the leaders that joined us on this webinar, and have an amazing, productive, focused day. Looking forward to seeing you guys again. Stay tuned, because soon we will share this video of this webinar online, and you could watch it again and send it to your friends so everyone will know what is this indistractable thing that you're talking about. Thank you, everyone. Nir, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Enjoyed it. Appreciate it. Thank you. Good luck, everybody.